So let's begin reading at Matthew chapter 10. We'll begin at verse 40. Jesus is speaking. He who receives you receives me. And he who receives me receives him who sent me. He who receives a prophet in the name of a prophet shall receive a prophet's reward. And he who receives a righteous man in the name of a righteous man shall receive a righteous man's reward. And whoever gives one of these little ones only a cup of cold water in the name of a disciple, assuredly I say to you, he shall by no means lose his reward. Setting is really important. You remember it is the setting of Jesus sending his disciples out to minister. They've never done this. They've never been in ministry. They've been on the job training. Jesus has gathered them together. He has had a prayer meeting at the end of chapter 9, and they have prayed that the Lord of the harvest would send out laborers into the harvest field. Obviously, Jesus jumps up and says, whoa, your prayers are answered. I'm going to send you. So he's sending them out. The premise, the key, the big idea, the focal point, the hinge of the entire passage revolves around verse 1 and 2 of chapter 10. It is the idea, the premise is the idea that there is a transfer of power that's going on. Up to this time, they've not been ministering. They haven't been adequate to minister. It wasn't a lack of education that they were dealing with. It was not a lack of, they didn't have their 501c3 set up. It wasn't that. It wasn't that they were lacking in terms of skills. It wasn't that they didn't have a counseling degree. It wasn't anything like that. They lacked the inward power to minister. The key that Jesus gives us in the passage is there is an inner power for ministry, and regardless of talent and regardless of education and regardless of anything else, if you do not have that, you are not capable of ministry. So Jesus has looked at them in verse 10 and has given them, he gave them power over unclean spirits to cast them out and to heal all kinds of sickness and all kinds of disease. Then you'll notice now the names of the 12 apostles. So they've gone from disciples to apostles, and that has taken place by the transfer of power that he's given them. If I had a craving, if I had a longing, if I had a desire that could be fulfilled in your life, it would be, that he would transfer what he is into you. And in that transfer, there is the adequate resource that you need for all that needs to take place in the ministry that he's dreamed for your life. That the key factor is not in education. He may use education. Thank you, Jesus. The key factor is not in talent. Woo! Aren't you glad for that? You're still in. The key factor is not in good looks. The key factor is not in brain ability. The key factor is not in how much you know. The key factor is in the transfer of the power from him to you until he is the power that you now have within you. And the disciples have become adequate now for ministry. Why? He has transferred his power. You will never make it in any kind of ministry, and you realize that when we say ministry, we're really talking Christianity, because no one is a Christian who doesn't minister. Because Christianity, by its very nature, is the outspill of his life through you, which is all about ministry. So you realize, again, when we talk about ministry, we're talking about Christianity. So nobody ever makes it in Christianity unless he transfers himself to you. That is the key factor. Any failure in your life is because you do not adequately possess him. He does not adequately possess you. That is the key factor. Always the bottom line. So the premise of the whole passage is this transfer of the divine power that has now come to be within his disciples. Now he's going to send them out, and he's giving them instruction. The whole chapter is a chapter of instruction. And we've, of course, carefully been working our way through this chapter and have now come to the end of it. We know that he picks up several subjects, but they are all tied together. He picks up the subject of persecution. He picks up the subject of being like him. And now he thunders to this climactic statement. And it's 3 verses. Oh, what a statement it is. Now, we've been working on an outline of the passage itself. And in verse 40, we're calling that the statement of ministry. And in verse 41, there is this 41 and 42, there is the status of ministry. And then in verse 41 and 42, there is the stipend of ministry. This is the last paragraph. You got to see this in its context now. This is the last paragraph in the instructions of ministry. He's never sent, his disciples have never gone out and ministered up to this point. This will be the first time. He's getting them prepared. He's giving them details. He's telling them what to take. He's telling them how much to take. He's telling them where to go. He's giving all of that. But he's gone beyond that in these last few verses. And he's literally giving us his heart in this final statement. Last time we dealt with this, we talked about the statement of ministry, which is verse 40. Verse 40 is the key to understanding the passage. If you understand the premise, which is that they can't minister unless he transfers his power, which he's done, if you got a hold of that, then you want to move to verse 40 with me. And in verse 40 is the statement of ministry. It is the proposition of the paragraph. It's the whole paragraph reduced down to one single sentence. Verse 42, or verse 41 and 42 hang on verse 40. They simply give a description, further insight, further detail to what's going on in verse 40. You cannot, you got to get this. You cannot understand verse 41 and 42. You can understand it, but you won't understand it correctly unless you understand and see them through verse 40. Verse 40 is an absolute key. Now, in light of that, I want to give you a little review of what we talked about when we tried to deal with verse 40. We gave you 3 ideas that are found in verse 40. One is the content of ministry, which he distinctly states. 2 is the connection of ministry, which is absolutely vital. And 3 is the conclusion of ministry, which is the summary of the whole thing. Let me just briefly walk you through those 3 ideas as seen in verse 40. Because if you don't get this, you won't understand anything else I'm going to say, which may be true anyhow. Verse 40. He who receives you receives me, and he who receives me receives him who sent me. Let's deal with the content of ministry in that statement. The content of ministry is him. He is the content of ministry. Man, I love this. He is the content. Now, he who receives you, see it at the beginning of verse 40. He who receives you receives me. The focus is on the one you're ministering to. The beginning pronoun, which is he, is the individual that you're going to minister to. He, and what is so significant about this one you're going to minister to? He must receive you. But note this, if he embraces you, we're talking about relationship here. If he embraces you, he's going to embrace me, Jesus says. So the focus is, I want to take the one that I'm ministering to, and I want him to embrace Jesus. He's going to embrace Jesus through me. Because if he embraces me, he will embrace Jesus. So the issue is, he's got to embrace Jesus. The absolute bottom line, fundamental is, we got to get this guy into Jesus. The heart of all ministry is, they've got to embrace Jesus. They've got to embrace Jesus. Somehow, we've got to get them into Jesus. See, the ultimate end of all ministry is not to eliminate pain. The ultimate end of all ministry is not to solve somebody's problems. The ultimate end of all ministry is we've got to get them into Jesus. Jesus has got to get into them. The fundamental, what we're after, the down to it of everything in ministry, of all the money, all the energy, everything we're about, all the yelling we do, is somehow, some way, we got to get them into Jesus. Somebody says, you're doing a good work down there. And I say, well, what exactly do you mean by that? And they say, well, you're giving away free food. You're trying to help here. You're trying to find jobs. You're trying to do this. That's not what we're doing. We want to get people into Jesus. That's the fundamental. That's the bottom line. The good work is not in feeding. The good work is not in providing a meal. The good work is that, we got to get them into Jesus. We got to get them in. Jesus has got to get into them. The fundamental, everything we do has to come back to that. Are you getting this? Everything we do has to come back to that. We've got to get them into Jesus. In relationship to my children, what's the fundamental down to it? What just absolutely has to happen? Well, they got to have a good education or they won't make it in. What? No! We got to get them into Jesus. Well, they got to have straight teeth or they'll never get an attractive mate. No, we got to get them into Jesus. We got to get, whatever happens, whatever education is or isn't, we got to, bottom line, got to get them into Jesus. The fundamental. See, he's really strong on that. He climaxes his whole instruction on ministry in terms of we got to get people into Jesus. Receiving him is the bottom line fundamental. So guess what the purpose of this service is tonight? Somehow Jesus has got to get into you and you've got to get into him. It's receiving him. Bottom line. That's the content of ministry. Now, it's interesting, the connection of ministry, obviously, is all interrelated with that. The connection of ministry is also given to us in the phrase, he who receives you receives me. See, the idea of the passage is that we are so intimate and so connected with Jesus that if you're going to receive me, you have to receive him. There's no way you can embrace me without embracing him. That's the impact of the message. That there is such a connection between the one who is filled with Jesus and the one you're ministering to, that when the one you're ministering to embraces the one who's ministering, he automatically gets in touch with Jesus. That's awesome, isn't it? So the connection is this intimacy, until you are so intimate with Jesus and so saturated with him that your mind, your entire being, the whole expression of who you are, the intent of your very motives in life, everything about you drives people to and embraces them and brings them into the essence of who Jesus is. You cannot receive me without receiving him if I'm that intimate with him. That's what he's calling us to. And I love that. We used, I think the last time, illustrations like, these are my golfing friends. On Saturday, we all go out golfing. I hang around them on Saturday. They're my friends. And the bottom line that connects us is golfing. Or is it goofing? No, it's golfing. Over here's my fishing friends. See, we're buying a boat together, we hang out, we go fishing, we brag on. And there's nothing wrong with golfing, and there's nothing wrong with things. These are my fishing friends. What connects us is the fishing. Oh, these are my church friends. See them on Sunday. And thy connection with them is church. That is not what he's dealing with. He says the connection between us is going to be Jesus. And if you're going to be if you're going to be close to me, if you and I are going to be, there's going to be the connection with Jesus is going to be so strong that before the thing is over, you'll either get in or you'll get out. The pressure's going to be so strong you won't be able to stand it. The essence of who he is going to be so great. It'll put so much pressure on your life that you can't tolerate to be around me. I want that. And the bottom line of our connection is going to be Jesus. Now, the third thing we saw in verse 40, this is really important. All of this is really important to understand what we're going to talk about in verse 41 and 42, is the conclusion of ministry. Well, if I'm going to embrace you, then I've got to embrace Jesus. Well, who am I embracing? Now, there was a grammar deal at the end of verse 40, and we're not going to go into that, but it's a little misleading in the English. It says, he who receives you receives me, and he who receives me receives him who sent me, which would be the Father. So it's like in the English it's saying, if you receive me, you're going to receive Jesus. And if you receive Jesus, you have to receive the Father. That's not what he's saying. What he's saying is, if you receive me, you have to receive Jesus. And if you receive Jesus, you know who you're receiving? The one who is sent by the Father. The emphasis is not, I'm receiving the Father. The emphasis is, I'm receiving the one who's sent by the Father. Well, what's the business of being sent by the Father? Oh, you'll never guess. The cross. So the bottom line of receiving Jesus is receiving cross style. The bleeding, suffering, dying. You're not receiving a three-piece suit, computer under his arm, slick, promotional Jesus. You're receiving a Jesus who's got his sleeves rolled up, who's washing dirty feet, who's pouring his life out, who's giving himself away. And so if you're going to receive me, you've got to receive him. And if you receive him, you know who you're receiving? You're receiving this bleeding, suffering, dying Messiah who's going to get all over you and who's going to bleed through you. That's his whole proposition. Now, in light of that, I want to move you to the status of ministry, which is what we want to talk about tonight. Verse 41 and 42. If you got that, if you got verse 40, if you got that in your mind, if you understand what we've just said, then we can move to the status of ministry. And what we want to do is we want to walk through the same three ideas. We want to walk through the content of ministry in light of the status of ministry. We want to walk through the connection of ministry in the status, and we want to look at the conclusion as well. Let's begin with the content of ministry. Look at verse 41. He who receives a prophet in the name of a prophet, or literally in the Greek it says, he who receives a prophet because he is a prophet shall receive a prophet's reward. He who receives a righteous man because he is a righteous man shall receive a righteous man's reward. Whoever gives one of these little ones only a cup of cold water in the name of a disciple, assuredly, I say to you, he shall by no means lose his reward. Now, content of ministry. Pay attention. Not that you aren't. Let's go back to verse 40. Verse 40 says, hey, if you're going to receive me, you've got to receive Jesus. And the intimacy that goes with that, and there's no way to receive me if you're not going to receive Jesus. And there's no way to receive me without receiving Jesus because of the overwhelming connection and the way we are together. So this is all about receiving Jesus. Now I want you to take that idea and I want you to push it aside like it doesn't exist. And I want you to come to verse 41 and 42 through the self-sourcing view. We don't have verse 40 now. We're just taking verse 41 and 42 and looking at it out of our carnal, self-centered, the way we are in the world. When you look at verse 40 and 41 and 42, you know what you see? These levels. Don't you? For instance, he who receives a prophet. Oh, you got the prophet. Oh, the prophet's the big dog. The prophet's the big man. Oh, the prophet is the one who is intimate with God. The prophet's the one who goes out and actually contacts God and comes back and tells you what he says. The prophet's the one that gets up and expounds the word. The prophet has the doctor in front of his name. Address him as such. The prophet is the high up one. The prophet is the one who has the authority of God. The prophet is the whoa. The prophet's the important guy. The prophet. Now you'll note in verse 41, he goes on and says, a righteous man. Now righteous men are good, but what good is it to be a prophet if you don't have righteous people who come and help you? So righteousness in this context is the guys who do what they're supposed to do. So the righteous guy is the guy who does the kind of law thing, who keeps the laws of God, who behaves himself, who comes to Sunday school on time, if we had it, who is the individual who ties his money. He's the guy who comes on Saturday night. He's the guy who helps clean up the church. He's the righteous man. You can count on him, but he's not a prophet. See, the prophet is the righteous man is the. And then there is this category down in verse 42 of the little ones. Oh, that's a dead giveaway, isn't it? Obviously, they're immature, make all kinds of blunders. You have to put up with them and tolerate them. I see that testimony, Joel. Yes, you have to put up with them. They're the individuals who, they're not. See, the prophet is really significant. The righteous people, you got to have them. You can do without the little ones. I mean, they come and go. They are, they aren't. They show up, they don't show up. See, the church doesn't hang, ministry doesn't hang on them. See, the top level, now, you could run wild with this, couldn't you, and make up your own levels, all the ones in between. Obviously, among the righteous, there would be individuals who are the top of the righteous and the low of the righteous. There would be little ones who aren't as little as others. Let's not go there. So there's this whole structure. Do you see it? This whole structure of who we're dealing with. If you're going to receive a prophet, that's up here. A righteous man, that's middle of the road. And then you got this little one. And of course, there's rewards connected with each one. You understand that the prophet reward would be much bigger because he's much more important than a righteous man. And a righteous man would have greater reward than little ones. I mean, what do they contribute? Now, I want you to reach out and grab a hold of verse 40 that we set aside. I want you to bring it back over here. I want you to see verse 41, 42, not through self-sourcing, not through the carnal mind. I want you to see it through the lens of verse 40. Changes everything. Absolutely changes everything. Verse 40 again. What's verse 40 all about? Oh, if you're going to receive me, you've got to receive him, because this is really all about him. And when you receive him, you know what happens? You embrace the one who's been sent by the Father, which is all about what? Bleeding, suffering, and dying, and washing feet. Which automatically, do you see the significance of that? See, the significance of a prophet is not his position. The significance of a prophet is, him and Jesus are tight. The significance of a righteous man is not that he's righteous. The significance of a righteous man is, he's tight with Jesus. The significance of a little one is not that he's immature and little. The significance of a little one is, he's coming into Jesus. Which puts them all on the same. Oh, isn't that revolting? Puts them all on the same level, because it's all about we're talking about this individual that we're trying to minister to. This individual that we're trying to minister to, if he receives me, he's got to receive Jesus. But guess what? Somebody ministered to me. And when I received him, I received Jesus. So he's going to receive the same Jesus I received, and the whole deal is about what? Receiving Jesus. Therefore, the conclusion is, it's all the same status. This is revolting, isn't it? Let's look at the connection of ministry. Now, again, I want you to take verse 40, which is all about what? Oh, if I'm going to receive you, I've got to receive Jesus because you're intimate with him, and there's no way to be intimate with you without being intimate with him. And the connection of the whole thing is so tight that there's no way to be in with you without being in with him. And if I'm going to hang around you and get close to you, I'm getting close to him. It's because you and him are so connected, and the idea is all about him in the connection. Let's take that concept, that verse 40, push it aside. Let's forget about it. Let's look at verse 41 and 42 through self-sourcing eyes. The prophet. Oh, yes, the prophet. See, he's the leader. The prophet's the one who stands up and proclaims, the one who runs the show, the one who makes the decisions. He's the leader of the whole thing. He comes up with the programs. He makes the decisions. He's the individual. And of course, the righteous one is below him, obviously. And what good would it be to be a leader if you didn't have people who followed? You heard about the guy who was huffing and puffing down the road, breathing hard, hardly able to make it, jogging as fast as he could. Came to some road workers and said, listen, I'm looking for a group of teenagers. I'm their leader. Hello, folks. Are you out there? What good is it to lead if nobody's following? Righteous people are to follow. I'm the leader. That's why they call me Dr. Bishop Pope Manley. Woo! I'm important. And the righteous people are to follow me. And if you are righteous, you will follow me. Because I'm here and you're here. Now, little ones, if you want to step on somebody, step on the little ones. You can get by with that. We tolerate them. They make all kinds of blunders and mess the place up. Some of them even come and tear up paper and leave it on the floor, and you have to pick it up. They make messes. That's the way the little ones are. We tolerate them. We hope that they'll become righteous someday, but few of them do. And we don't count on them for finances. Good night. It's the righteous people who are the financial base. Come on. They're the ones who have real jobs, not the prophet. He never works. He's not supposed to work. He's supposed to pray and read the Bible. It's these righteous people that are supposed to get with a program and support it. Come on, righteous people. Shape up. So you got the prophet, you got the righteous people, you got the little ones. Come on. And the whole deal is the whole attitude is, how can you help me? When you come to a board meeting and you don't have enough money, you know what the obvious answer is? Let's get some more people in here who got money. Let's go after some money people in the community. So the offerings will increase. That's easy. Because the whole idea is we want people to come to do what? Help us. I mean, why would you want to get people who couldn't help you? About 20 years ago, we had this phenomenal sweep of bus ministries. I mean, every church of the Nazarene just bought buses and buses. I know one church that could run about 250 in their sanctuary, and they had 5 buses and bus 50 kids in on each bus. When the bell rang for Sunday school, stay out of the hallways, man. In fact, they never got the kids off the bus. They picked the kids up on the bus, drove into the church parking lot, parked, and said, okay, we're going to have Sunday school. The kids never got off the bus. Jesus loves me, this I know. Oh, now I'm going to take you to McDonald's. And we took them home. But we got to count them. Why? It was because they were there to help us. Well, that's why you have little ones. Somebody's got to clean up the toilets. Righteous people are there to be the support base, all to help the prophet. Now let's reach out and grab a hold of verse 40. Let's drag it back in here. What's verse 40 all about? Oh, if you're going to receive me, you got to receive him. There's no way he can't be in the middle of this. And the minute Jesus gets in the middle of your life and he gets in the middle of my life, we have this overwhelming connection. And guess who we're connected with? We're connected with the Jesus who was sent, who was a bleeding, suffering, dying, washing feet kind of person. Because he had the heart of the Father. So what does that do to this? If the connection is him, you receive him, I receive him, and our connection is in the outpouring of our lives. We fight a lot. Doesn't mean the fights are gone. It means we fight, we argue, we dispute, but the argument is who's going to get to do the most. How can I help? And you don't want my help, but I'm arguing with you. I want to help. So we fight over how much we can give. We fight over how we can pour our lives out. We fight over giving ourselves up. Because we've received him. Let me give you one more. The conclusion of ministry. Again, verse 41 and 42. Take verse 40. What's verse 40 all about? Oh, if you receive me, you're going to receive him. Therefore, if you received him, and I have him and you have him, our connection, our intimacy, our relationship, it revolves around him. And who is he? Oh, he's the one who's been sent by the Father, which is a crucified Christ. Push that aside. Let's come to the conclusion. Let's view it through the self-sourcing view. Prophet. Do you realize what he says? Verse 41. He who receives a prophet in the name of a prophet shall receive a prophet's reward. Oh, a prophet's reward. Do you know what a prophet's reward is like? Whoa. I can hardly wait. See, a prophet's reward is, the prophet is like the senior pastor. If you go to the budget of the church, you know who gets the biggest salary? The senior pastor. They wouldn't pay an associate more than the senior pastor. That would be stupid. Wouldn't it? I mean, the senior pastor, he has his own parking spot right by the door. And drives a big car. Probably red. Why? Because he's the prophet. He's the senior pastor. He has more value than the rest of the church can mow by the wayside, but you don't show up on Sunday, but he does. Because the service hangs around. He's the person he has doctor in front of his name. Come on. Now the righteous man, he gets a reward as well, you understand. But it's not as great as the righteous man is going to die and go to heaven, but he won't get this big a mansion as the prophet. And all of this is in proximity on Main Street next to Jesus' mansion. The little ones, cabin on the back 40 with an outhouse. So what do you want to be in all of this? Prophet. Prophet. That's to get a prophet's reward. Now let's grab a hold of verse 40. Bring it back here. Let's see all of that through verse 40. What's verse 40 all about? Oh, if you're going to receive me, you've got to receive Jesus. Because this is all about receiving Jesus. This is all about Jesus being in the middle. Because, see, if you receive me, you're going to receive Jesus. But then I received a prophet and received Jesus. So you know what my reward was for receiving a prophet? I received Jesus. That was my reward. So if you receive a prophet, you're going to receive Jesus, which is the reward. In fact, if you're a righteous man, guess what? You're going to receive a righteous man's reward. And guess what the reward is? Jesus. If you would give a cup of cold water in the name of Jesus, you know what you're going to receive as a reward? Jesus. So Jesus is the reward. So whether it's a prophet, whether it's a righteous man, or whether it's a little one, it's all about, the reward is all about Jesus. Well, what about mansions in the sky? I don't know, and I don't care. Jesus is enough. Jesus is enough. Well, what about no more, no more, no more, no more, no more, no more, no more? If you don't know what that list is, I could tell you. No more tears, no more sorrow, no more dying, no more, no more, no more, no more. In fact, when you get done singing it, you think there isn't anything there. Because it's all about no more. This is not about no more. This is about Him. This is not about running away from pain. This is about embracing Him. This is not about no suffering. This is about embracing Him. This is about embracing Him. He is the reward. Now, if you're not getting this, it's okay, because the next time we preach on this, we're going to do a whole sermon just on the reward thing. Because this really matters. The reward is Him, Him, Him. And the minute you get off of the reward being Him, you're into the self-view of the structure and how much do I get, and this is all about Him. So the whole focus of the passage is, you've got to embrace Him. You must embrace Him. If you embrace a prophet, you're going to be driven to Jesus. If you embrace a righteous man, you're going to be driven to Jesus. If you embrace a little one, you're going to be driven to Jesus. We are going to just absolutely drive you to Jesus. We want to be so connected, so filled with, talk so much about Him that He is all over our lives and saturates you. The whole purpose is Him. You've got to know Him. Jesus, forgive me when I have fallen into the political structure of the self-centered view of life. Forgive me when I thought my opinion was so important and so great that it mattered. Forgive me, God, when I was so wrapped up in the way I wanted to do it that I thought that was the only way it could be done, when the method didn't matter after all. It was about You. Forgive me, oh God, when my mind has been on rewards and what You owe me and what You should give me, when it should have been on You and the embracing of Your person, the intimacy of Your reality. Forgive me. And would You bring me back until it's just You. You are my position. You are my location. Intimacy with You is the connection. Could You make my life so saturated with You that everybody who gets close to me is drawn to You? And when I get with my golfing friends, they begin to experience You. And when I get with my fishing friends, they experience You. And when I get with my church friends, they are driven to You. In the name of Jesus, would you break us of all of our false superiority feelings? And would you bring us to kneel in you and you in us? Until your style is our style. Heads are bowed. I want to invite you tonight to Him. Who is He? One who's sent by the Father. If you want to receive Him, you must embrace who He is, how He feels, what He wants, where He's going. Sent by the Father. Have you been an expression of His attitude? Have you been the flow of His life? Do you see people through verse 30, through verse 40? Anybody want to lose their life in Him? And if you say, why should I come to the altar? That's easy. Why shouldn't you come to the altar? What is it that would keep you from coming to the altar? Why wouldn't you fall at His feet? And the only thing that could keep you from falling at His feet is the old self-sourcing that wonders what people will think. What about my position? What about my image? Jesus, save us from ourselves. Please. Altar is open. Moments of seeking.